Good afternoon, you all. First of all you guys, thank you for coming. I want to welcome everybody, first of all, in person, and everybody who's come and joined us on Zoom and on Facebook. It's a fair challenge to try and coordinate everything, the local and the remote feeds, so bear with us, especially on Zoom if there are any technical challenges. We are here today to celebrate the life of Arthur Sidney Dunkley. Dad passed away last week on Monday, and without a question, that's a great loss to all of us. However, I really think that he wouldn't want us just to grieve. He'd want us to celebrate his life and to celebrate the time that we've been able to spend with him. So to that end, and to lighten our mood maybe a little bit, I want to share with you a poem that he wrote called Aging Happy. And it goes something like this. My mind is full of cobwebs, and my memory lost in fog, and my intellect's ability declines. So I feel a bit frustrated, and I'm going to kick the dog to show I am emotionally refined. I will be a little careful, as my knees have been replaced, and I do have arthritis of the spine. Of course, I've had a spinal fusion, but my old-timers' delusions mean I can't remember places, dates, or times. Never mind. I'm going dancing in the evening with a pretty girl or two. And by next week, Sunday morning, I'll be fine. Now, of course, Dad wasn't much like that. He was pretty sharp, and he didn't kick the dogs, and he did dance with a pretty girl once or twice. Now, what we're doing, let me start off by being a bit more serious than that. And say that Dad was a guy who lived life to the full, and his sphere of influence over the years was really enormous. Apart from his chosen profession, Dad was an outdoors man in every sense of the word from an early age. He learned bushcraft on the farm, he rode horses, he trained dogs, he shot game, and when he went to boarding school, he excelled both academically and on the sports field. He was the head boy at Churchill High School. He was the pipe major in their band, which toured England at the time. He even met the Queen a couple of times. He was an expert fisherman too. And I remember as a small boy growing up in Cape Town, that one of our favorite meals was freshly caught trout from the river up near Stellenbosch. Now, we are especially happy to have with us on Zoom two of Dad's longtime friends from the early days. Unless I'm mistaken, Ian Craigie has joined us from Australia and will give us a few words from down under, followed by Mike Stone from the UK. So I think thanks for your contributions, both of you gentlemen. And if you could take it away, Ian.
I'm delighted to be the curtain raiser. In January 1957, 64 and a half years, our 6-year journey through Churchill School. Mike Arthur is the most talented person that I have ever known, and Mike became a Rhodes Scholar. That's enough of a shout out for Mike, and you'll hear from him in a few moments. Yesterday, I read extracts from the 6th editions of the Winstonian, our school's annual magazine, which Americans call yearbooks. And that covered Arthur's journey, which was punctuated by academic awards at the annual prize-giving functions and record-breaking accomplishments in athletics including a national record that stood for many, many years. The left-wing position, no inference to politics in that one, in the first 15 from 1960 to 1962 was deservedly owned by Arthur. He was also a member, as Roke has just told us, of the Churchill School Pipe Band and became the drum major. So it is not necessary for me to recap on that. But that's not all. He was a leading performer in the school's dramatic society and regular contributor to the literature section of the Winstonian. This is an extract from the Winstonian written by one of his peers. It was unfortunate that Dunkley spoiled his performance by periodically playing entirely to his female following in the audience. I think that was just one jealous critic, as many of them are. We loved it, as did all the girls from our sister school, Roosevelt. The Winstonian also provided a medium for Arthur to share his philosophical ideas on complex topics that have survived, been modified, and are now incorporated in his recent books. The school mag was exposed us to some of his early poetry, and all this while he was still just a teenager. I could list a whole lot of the achievements, such as the surgeon, the philosopher, the poet, the artist, the photographer, but you know them well. And I am just pleased that I was able to walk in the shadows of this man through the times and his times at UCT, then back to home in Rhodesia and later to Zimbabwe. But I'd prefer to tell you what Arthur meant to me. Without him, I would not be married to this lovely lady that is sitting next to me. It is because of him that we have been married for 54 years, and she is the center of more good things in my life than any single person deserves. The times that we spent in the bush, I have left towards the end because these were very precious to him and likewise to me and all those who were fortunate enough to accompany him on the many trips. That the part of that daily routine was always to be around the campfire. And this is where we reminisced over our day's activities, sightings, exaggerating lots and lots of blissful BS. Talking to the stars and listening to the silence was also a favorite activity. In recent years, that means from my age, only 20 years ago, we have remained in close contact, courtesy of Mr. Gates and Mr. Jobs. On or about the 9th of January 1943, there was a great happening when two gametes fused and donated their DNA to a zygote that would be born on the 9th of October of the same year. The genetic code of that zygote, like that of all human zygotes, was unique, and it contained the messages that developed into a very special human being who we know as Arthur S. Dunkley. The stats support the following statement. There will never be another zygote that could be labeled Arthur Sidney Dunkley. We were lucky enough to find him and among the very privileged to benefit from his wisdom, talents, and most of all, his humanity. R.I.P. Arthur, I will never forget you, and thank you for making me a better person.
Thank you, Ian, once again. And I think if we can, without any delay, switch over to Mike Stone. I believe he's overcome some initial nervousness and is with us live on Zoom. Is that correct? If so, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed, Roke. I want to talk about the myriad talents of Arthur Dunkley. I appreciate that others will also be talking about that, including most recently Ian, but I feel privileged to have known Arthur as a special friend over a span of 64 years because he was, without doubt, the most sublimely talented person I've ever encountered. From a young age, and we first met in Form 1A at Churchill in 1957, he displayed a diversity of skills that his schoolmates could only marvel at. He had academic brilliance. He could run like the wind, jump out of the pit, and hurl the javelin for miles, setting records that stood for over 20 years. He could play the violin, guitar, and bagpipes. He could speak several languages, among them Portuguese. He once had a girlfriend from Mozambique. He could write good poetry and win debates. He was steeped in bushcraft and an expert with fishing rod and rifle, and he was always destined to be head boy. We were next door neighbors in the months before he left for Natal University, and then lost touch until April 1980, when I returned to Zimbabwe Rhodesia, as it then was, on a business trip from the United Kingdom, where I'd lived since 1967. On arrival in Salisbury, I phoned Arthur from Meeker's Hotel. He invited me to check out and stay at his house, and our friendship blossomed immediately. I discovered that his range of skills had developed exponentially since 1963. He had become a highly respected surgeon who lectured at the local university, an artist whose work was featured at exhibitions, an international fencer, a world-renowned falconer, a multiple winner of field trials for gun dogs, an interpreter of dreams at society meetings, and a naturalist and botanist matched by very few, one of those being our mutual friend, Ian Craigie. My business in Zimbabwe required me to make frequent visits, and I shared memorable trips to the wilder parts of the country with Arthur and Ian. Notably, a grueling expedition to Chisarera to find the extremely rare Taita falcon, upon which Arthur was an acknowledged world expert, and a memorable canoe safari at Mana Pools. Arthur's expertise grew ever wider to encompass the captive breeding of birds of prey, the surgical repair of damaged falcons, including a Taita that lived in his house, beekeeping, which he abandoned after the bees inflicted fatal injuries upon his beloved English setters, the miniaturization of a wide variety of African trees, which became a commercial venture, and viticulture, when he purchased the Crusader Mountain in Juliusdale to establish a vineyard there. He continued to paint and write poetry, and had a spell as chief surgeon for the Cayman Islands, where his photographic ability flourished, and he enjoyed scuba diving. Arthur moved to Somerset in 1999, and we were able to meet at regular intervals. In Taunton, he enhanced his reputation as a pediatric surgeon and a specialist in microsurgery, and became a professional photographer. We tramped through the Pontoc Hills, Exmoor, and Somerset Levels together, enjoying the bird life and discovering some peregrine breeding sites, and shared treasured evenings talking about poetry and music. Shortly before leaving for Claremont in 2019, he became interested in archery and was, needless to say, proficient at it. He also began to write short stories. What a man. Arthur acquired his expertise through a mixture of natural talent, wonderful hand-to-eye coordination, muscular flexibility, commitment, dedication, and hard work. Because everything he did seemed to come so naturally and easily to him, people often assumed that he did not have to work hard for success. I can attest that Arthur invested many hours of effort into tasks that really mattered to him. He also had the capacity to conserve energy and rely on others to do the heavy administrative lifting. Let me illustrate this with an anecdote recorded in my journal of the expedition to Chisarera, which I referred to previously. On the way back to camp, Ian Craigie and I spot two elephants jostling each other with their trunks. Ian says this is very unusual. We soon appreciate the cause of the dispute. The first elephant has been shaking an albida tree to dislodge the pods. The second elephant has stood idly by, while the first has done all the work and then picked up the pods for itself. Ian promptly christens the second elephant Dunkley. On being told later of this episode, Arthur expressed great admiration for the resourcefulness of his namesake. Arthur was a wonderful friend to me, kind, generous, patient, endlessly interesting and loyal. And
Mike,
I will miss him dreadfully.
We're honoured to
Thank
have
you
you
for
share with
everything,
us
great
today.
man.
Now, whenever Dad was back in Zimbabwe, he'd always go out and he'd visit with Gary Stafford at Kuembashiri. And so some of their stories I've heard more than once. But I now want to call on Gary to come up and maybe tell us one more. Come on, Gary.
I'm going to ask Barry Armstrong to join me. I'm so glad Bree's clever with the wide angle lens. The two of us. I met this young man through Arthur. Sorry. 1979. I was really interested in falconry and I had nobody to help me. And I've been practicing by myself since I was 14. And then I heard about this man, Dunkley. So I went along to his house and he was very busy, as he always was. But falconry always took the prime time of his day. And he said to me, there's a little boy down the road. I was a soldier in those days. Colour sergeant and all the rest. And Arthur sends me off this little boy, little young man from school. And that's where I met Barry. And Barry said, well, Arthur's like my dad because I go there every day. And I actually adopted that same habit. So we used to go down to Arthur's house most days. And Barry would be there, the boys would be there as well. And we'd go out and fly. And there's so many stories, but the thing I'm going to miss the most, and I was fortunate enough to do it just recently when Arthur came back home. And then prior to that, when Arthur met Barry after a long time, he came out and visited. We went out and flew the Falcons. And this is the last little boy that Arthur flew with. His name is Chickabom. Why Chickabom? Because he just makes me feel good. I don't know if you remember that song. But anyway, a long time, quite a few years ago now, Arthur was on one of the most memorable days for me because he phoned me up and he said, my dad, that's old Mr. Dunkley, wants to go out hawking one more time. So we went out and I had a little tearsel again. Arthur introduced me to tearsel peregrines, and we went out and Mr. Dunkley got out the car and we had a Suduli there and I knew they were Franklin, and my English setter came in on point. A dog that Arthur gave me, my first English setter, came in on point, beautifully classic. Said to Mr. Dunkley, just move over here, sir. And he moved over. Tearsel went up and up and up. We flushed the Franklin. And as it was, the Franklin flew directly over Mr. Dunkley Senior's head, and the tearsel smashed it with the feathers just falling on him. And as it fell, the tearsel carried off down. He hit it with such velocity, he flew down probably a kilometer. I said, don't worry, I know where he'll be. He'll be on a Suduli waiting for me. So Mr. Dunkley, Arthur, myself drove down there. And that day, my tearsel for 9.5 years was killed by some farm workers. They killed him with a spade and hid the Franklin. And my falcon was dead. It went into a magazine. It's called 9.5 years. But that was with the two Dunkleys. And that was a huge privilege. I feel broke today. You're very...
Well said, Gary. Lovely words. Hello, everybody. Now I'm started. So much as already said about Arthur and all his amazing talents. So I won't try and repeat any of them. But I remember my older brother, who was a very capable person, and I would come home from Arthur's place, and he'd say, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Well, Arthur told me." And he'd say, "Well, where did you learn that?" I said, "No, Arthur taught me that." He said, "Well, where did you learn to fish with a fly rod instead of a normal rod? You've never used that before." I said, "Arthur taught me." And he said, where did you learn to paint like that?" I said, "No, Arthur." And he said, "Bloody hell, there's no ways there can be anybody as talented as that." But he was just the most amazing person. I first met Arthur when I was the young age of 13. I just joined the Falconry Club, and Arthur had just become chairman. And one of his first port of calls was to come visit this little sprog with this gator goshawk, which he didn't really know what he was doing with. And in a very short space of time, Arthur taught me. I got that bird hunting and flying, and flying very successfully. And in a very short time, Arthur became my absolute hero and mentor, and even like a second father. I was literally at the Dunkley's house 4 to 5 afternoons of every week. In the school holidays, I practically used to live there. My parents wanted to disown me and say, "Why don't you just stay there all the time?" They were very, very special years of my life, and a very, very special person who will be greatly missed. And I wish Arthur all the best on his journey to wherever he's going. I know it'll be for the very best people. Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks, Barry. I know it's hard to talk, isn't it, sometimes? I remember some of those days too. And Sean and I were a lot more badly behaved than you were, Barry. And we didn't fly the hawks. We ran into the bushes to chase the doves up. That was our job. Anyway, thank you very much. No doubt we'll be joining you soon at Lake Chavero once more. Gary. Now, can anyone kill that phone? There's a phone going. Switch it off, throw it against the wall, put it on stun, anything like that. Now, to carry on, I'd like to invite some colleagues of my dad's in the medical profession to speak. In that profession, my father taught as well as practiced for most of his lifetime, and he'd only recently retired. And today we're fortunate enough to have with us Nancy Yonka, and she will say a few words whilst we queue up a video contribution from Frank Dewey. So Nancy, if you would like to come on up. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was really honoured to be asked by Heather to speak for a few minutes about Arthur and his professional life as a surgeon. But I really don't know how I can fit a lifetime of exceptional service to humanity into just a few minutes, but I'm going to try. I've known Arthur for over 40 years. When we first met, we were all young and, dare I say, dangerously good looking. Arthur was the dashing surgeon who delivered the most amazing and entertaining lectures to many generations of young medical students at what was then the Godfrey Huggins School of Medicine. Then it became the University of Zimbabwe and later the College of Health Sciences. Arthur was admired by all, and he was also feared by many because he didn't suffer fools lightly. But if a student was interested and was willing to learn, he would ensure that that student was given absolutely every opportunity to learn and to grow. I don't think that there's a single graduate from the University of Zimbabwe School of Medicine that doesn't have a story to tell that concerns one of the lectures that he gave. In fact, many of his students, even in the last couple of weeks, have been to see me and have quoted verbatim from lectures that he gave to them 25, 30, 40 years ago. I was lucky enough to do part of my surgery internship with Arthur on his team at Harare Central Hospital. And I remember watching in absolute awe as he repaired what's called a tracheoesophageal fistula in the middle of the chest of a tiny newborn premature baby girl who weighed no more than a kg. This child was choking on everything that she was swallowing. And at the end of the operation, 2 weeks after the surgery, this child wasn't just feeding, she was actually thriving. That was just one of the many, many incredible surgeries that I witnessed Arthur performing. And he did it all with very, very limited resources, working in a central government hospital. He always was able to make a plan and do surgeries that I don't think were even being done in the first world. He had so many different interests in medicine. And in 1997, when we opened the Well Woman Clinic, I invited Arthur to join us as the clinical director of the Well Woman Clinic. And he played a pivotal role in the setting up of protocols and standards for the screening and detection of breast cancer through the Well Woman Clinic. During that time, when he was working with us at the Well Woman Clinic, and right up until the time that he left Zimbabwe to go and live in the UK, we would have lunch every Thursday at Cheryl's in the Park, where we would discuss any and all pertinent issues and generally just solve the problems of the world. Those Thursday lunches were very relaxed, casual times, and it was a great distraction from the usual stresses of the week. For the first 5 years or so that we were having lunch at Cheryl's in the Park, Arthur would bring Sylvia along with him. And then later, Kathy would join us, before eventually Arthur left Zimbabwe and moved with Kathy and her 3 children to live in the UK. In his truest sense, Arthur was an artist. And everything that Arthur did in the field of medicine was just a reflection of his really deep love and his passion for what is the art of medicine. Although he retired from performing surgery just a few years ago, his expert opinion is still sought, highly sought after. And the latest article that's been published was actually, it's ironic because it was entitled Perspectives on COVID-19. And it was published on the 20th of November last year in an International Journal of Risk and Safety in Medicine. He was an incredibly talented surgeon and medical practitioner. And he's got the clearest thinking and sharpest brain that I have ever encountered. Whatever he did it with complete passion. And it was that passion that really set him aside from the others. He has been a great inspiration to many generations of young medical professionals who've had the privilege to work with and to learn from him. So I feel deeply grateful to have known Arthur in this lifetime. I know that I speak for his patients and for all of those who've learned from and have been mentored by Arthur when I thank the universe for his life and his service. And when I convey our condolences and love to all of his family, all of his loyal friends, those that are here today, and those joining us from all over this beautiful planet of ours. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nancy. Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming and appreciate you speaking. Now, I think we should have queued up a clip from Frank Dewey. And if you can switch over to that.
First of all, I'd like to thank Heather for asking me to say a few words about Arthur. I was fortunate to have Arthur as a senior lecturer in surgery at university in the mid-80s. He was a legend even then, at the top of his game. He had won the gold medal at the Edinburgh edition of the FRCS exams and was completely self-assured to the point of arrogance. I once asked him why so many surgeons were so irritatingly self-confident, and he said that if they ever doubted themselves, they would never have the confidence to stick a knife into another person, which made perfect sense to me. Everyone admired Arthur, and I made him a role model, as many of us at university did. I'd always wanted to become a general surgeon, and here was the absolute best of them. I soaked up his lectures, his pearls of wisdom, and his ethos. I can still hear some of his lectures in my head, as I can with Prof. Thomas, Foxy Wiles, Greg Powell, and Charles Bannerman, and so on. I loved Arthur's off-the-wall, disrespectful sense of humour and the quick, sharp, easy wit he had. His lectures, tutorials, and ward rounds were feared by students who dreaded being the subject of his interrogations. However, a few of us realised that what he liked was someone who dared to stand up to him and question him. He sometimes talked absolute drivel for a while until someone would have the gumption to just stand up to him and tell him he was making it up on the spot, which he frequently did. In final year, I made sure I was on his service at Parry Hospital, even though we were usually on take on Tuesdays and Friday nights. Colin Rogers, since then one of my lifelong friends, was his SHO, and we got to know Arthur really quite well. My favourite specific memory of his teaching methods occurred one night at about 2:30 in the morning during an appendectomy. Any general surgeon will tell you that the easiest job they ever did was an appendectomy. However, sometimes they can also be the most difficult as well. The poor registrar, who had just joined the service, had failed for about 90 minutes to find the appendix and called Arthur out. He arrived shortly thereafter, having been called from his bed at Wellston, 22 kilometres away, wearing his trademark sheepskin jacket over his tracksuit. He donned a pair of paper overshoes over his boots and, holding a paper face mask over his nose, but otherwise unchanged, stepped into the theatre to inquire what the problem was. "Mr. Dunkley," stammered the reg, "I can't find the appendix." "I'm sorry," said Arthur, "you what?" He stuck his hand out and the theatre sister supplied a sterile glove to cover it. Arthur stepped up to the theatre table with his gloved right hand, still holding the paper face mask in place with his left hand, stuck his fingers into the incision and whipped out the appendix, to the relief of the registrar, who assumed that his worries were now over. "There it is," said Arthur. "Now you go find it." And he stuck it straight back in the abdomen, walked out and had a cup of tea in the theatre tea room. A few years later, Colin and I were working in the Cayman Islands and decided it would be fun to have Arthur there as well. Colin said, "But how would we get him here?" I suggested merely mentioning that we were earning loads of money on a Caribbean island, doing low-key fun things in a 37-hour week should just about cover the essentials. We contacted him and the method worked. He started work there 6 weeks after Colin's and my original discussion. We had 2 great years there, and Arthur made himself locally famous there as well. Not only as a surgeon, but as a keen bird watcher. He loved fly fishing and told me that he had supported his family on fly fishing in Cape Town in his early training years. He became known in Cayman for fly fishing for tarpon in the canals on the island. Tarpon are a large, almond-looking, silvery barracuda-like fish. He also used to paint quite respectably and sold a few paintings there. We became great friends in this period, and when we returned to Zim, we shared rooms for several years until he went to Taunton in the UK. One of the features that made Arthur such an appealing friend was that he was always finding ways to be creative. He dabbled in playing guitar, a great relief to me, as I don't know if I could have put up with him when he was in his bagpipe playing stage. He painted well. He wrote several books of poetry that he managed to get somebody to print. In his last couple of decades, he became a very keen photographer. He had a mind that was always restlessly searching for new outlets for his creative potential. Of course, watching him operate was to realize that you were in the presence of an artist. He loved the trick questions and unusual presentations that clinical situations throw at you, and often referred to himself as an operating physician. In UZ days, Prof. Thomas would frequently get Arthur to have a look at patients he wanted a second opinion on medically. I've been greatly honoured to become a close friend of Arthur's, having known him first as an icon to follow at university. In the end, I chose not to become a surgeon for reasons that Arthur understood and agreed with, unrelated to the excessive number of thumbs I now find attached to the end of each of my upper limbs. I shall miss him terribly and his visits up here, our dinners and conversations, his observations on life and that irresistible cheeky glint in his eye when you know a little sideways jibe is about to be launched at you. Rest in peace, my friend, and give him hell.
Thanks for the humour. And Frank, by the way, still practices from those same rooms where they worked together for several years. Now, for the next segment, we're going to hear from family. I understand that we have the Greens who've joined us via Zoom from Winchester in the UK. That is Duncan and Margaret and their son Michael. Dad spent many happy moments with them at their family farm. And more recently, they made a trip out to Africa, during which they joined him in Claremont for a while. So hopefully it's all still well with the tech and the bandwidth and everything. And then if you could queue up the Greens and they can go ahead with their message, please.
We have many fond memories of Arthur, many of which are from when he lived here in the UK. We always enjoyed his visits and our Christmases together. He had many stories of his interesting life in Africa, from his childhood on his parents' farm, his school days eating sardines with condensed milk, and many others throughout his life, all of which he told us over several glasses of red wine. He would often talk fondly about his family, especially after his visits back home. We had some lovely trips with him to Scotland and Italy, and most memorably when he took us on a wonderful adventure to Zimbabwe, South Africa and Namibia, seeing many lovely places, visiting family and meeting some of his friends, a trip which we will always remember. Arthur had many passions and hobbies throughout his life. Here he enjoyed his love of wildlife and photography by taking photos of birds in particular on the Somerset levels. He took up archery and soon became very good at it, and even gave some lessons to Duncan. It was here that he met the lovely Rose, and we enjoyed their company down in Somerset and here in Winchester, before they both moved to South Africa. We were also able to get to visit them both in their lovely home in Claremont last year. He will be remembered in many ways and will be sadly missed by his family and friends.
Guys, we really treasure that contribution today. So moving on, I was going to have Heather come up and speak to us, but she doesn't trust herself today. And so she asked if she could contribute a video clip, and we've had to agree because it's her house. And I do just want to include a really special vote of thanks to you, Kaz, for letting us hold the memorial here. And if that video is cued, then
Arthur was and always will be the dude. One of my earliest memories was the whole family sitting around the pool at Georgia. We kids had been in the water for hours, and once we were blue from cold, we would lie on the warm cement and the dude would regale us with stories about beeping Slooty and the Prugly Ince. We would all roar with laughter and beg for more. He never got the tongue twisters wrong, which was probably an enormous feat considering how much alcohol I have no doubt had been consumed. The dude was a master storyteller, from peculiar fairy tales to factual stories. He had an absolute gift and would hold his audience riveted. He told the story of how he was called to the hospital from a themed party and arrived in a white caftan with sandals and his long hair flowing. The patient took one look and asked if he had crossed to the other side. that made Arthur's day. Family Christmases used to be dozens and dozens of cousins and much hilarity. The dude was always the center of the hilarity. One year we got minute playing cards in our Christmas crackers. He quickly taught us how to play blackjack using toothpicks as currency. Granny Dunkley was horrified that he was teaching the children to gamble, but we all carried on anyway. Many weekends on the farm were taken up with falconry. Now, I am sure my sisters would agree that was not a lot of joy. He had a bloody faulty falcon. Every single time he let it go, it would fly into a tree and sit there looking smug. Our job was to pick berries and find stones to hurl at said falcon to make it move. All done while the dude was screaming at us not to stone the bird, just around the bird. Oh, how we hated that bird. It is probably fortunate that my eyesight was so poor, because that bird would have had a good stoning. Then as the years went by, the dude became the family secret keeper, arbitrator, general advisor, and sounding board. He was so involved in all of our lives, and he loved us all unconditionally. I know for myself that being with Arthur made me want to be the best version of myself I could possibly be. He was our rock, and I have no idea how we will manage without him. Who is going to arbitrate in the family disputes? We are all lost without him. The dude loved to laugh. Even on his last visit, we were all together and there was a huge amount of laughter. Cheryl was telling tales of my slightly volatile moments, and Arthur roared with laughter. I made the fatal mistake of giving him Alwina's walking stick. He used the stick as an extension of his fingers, and for the rest of the trip, the walking stick was part of his body language. Peter Pointer had nothing on this stick. Waving his stick around while sitting on his green chair with a glass of wine is a memory I will forever treasure. Sadly, all good things come to an end. Arthur's death is such a blow. The lives he touched are incalculable. The miracles he performed uncountable. And after a hard day's work performing life-saving surgery, he would often go home to watch cartoons. From surgery to falconry to fencing to art to music, he taught me all the naughty songs, to poetry, dog training. The list of his achievements is enormous and too broad to ever be encapsulated in a speech. Our lives are so enriched by knowing and loving him. Cheers, dude.
Oh.
We love you.
Thanks, Cuz, for being brave today. Wouldn't be complete without you. This place was always Dad's home from home when he visited over the years. And you guys did share a very special bond. Now, speaking of complete, I've asked Rowan to say something as well. I'm hoping that Rowan is queued up on Zoom. My not-so-baby brother joins us from Claremont, as does Rose Kenyon, who's, many of you know, has been Dad's partner for the last several years. And she wasn't keen on breaking into tears publicly either, and also asked to be excused from speaking. So Rowan, the floor, or rather the screen, and all of our attention are yours.
I'm not sure if you can see me. I'm still seeing the screen of the house. But I'm sitting here in Claremont and Rose is next to me. And other family members and friends from Claremont. Hopefully you can see. We're probably breaking the lockdown rules, but we must. I have prepared something, which I'm going to try and sort of just bring up as a cue. Maybe not. I think the first thing was I wanted to say thank you. I hope you can hear me. Thank you all. Thank you to the friends who are there, the friends who are online elsewhere, the friends who aren't with us today, but will nevertheless be thinking of him. Your friendship is a special gift that made his life special. So thank you for that. I want to say thank you to the family. Thank you for all your love and support over this time, and again, Dad kind of thought himself as a patriarch. We'll have to find a new one. Heather is the queen.
Yay! I think we're inviting you officially. You're in a crown.
Yes, you can have a crown. Yeah, I really, I think we should all live longer. Human beings don't live long enough. And I know Dad wanted to live longer. He wanted to write more poetry and publish a book. He wanted to paint another canvas. He wanted to go to Chiserera. In fact, we talked about a holiday where I'd bring Thomas and Johnny, and Rose would come, and we'd go and visit Chiz in the Zambezi Valley and Kariba and Nyanga, and visit the family and meet everyone. And we just didn't get around to doing it. Yeah, our human survival these days, it's not determined by the random genetic combinations that create a zygote. It's determined by our human community, by our ability to cooperate and to create a ecologically sustainable society. And for that, you need wisdom. And for that, you need long life. I'm convinced that it's time that gives us the wisdom. It's only in the second half of our lives that we gather wisdom. And just when we are able to contribute the most, we don't. On the other hand, maybe it's not the time that's the issue, it's the aging. The frailty, that gives us perspective. The ability to think of others and not ourselves. To focus on our relationships. That's where wisdom comes from. I'll miss our conversations like this. When we were traveling, inspired by the vistas, the wildlife, the space, there'd be lots of silence and there'd be conversation, and often we would solve all the world's problems and somehow wonder why no one else had seen the answer. I'll miss our conversations and our time together. We've been able to spend more time recently at Claremont, and it's been very special. I'm going to try and read something from Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's perhaps not quite what he believed, but let me try. Jonathan had been cast out by his family and flock and lived a life alone, exploring and defining the art of flight. There came an evening then and found Jonathan gliding, peaceful and alone, through his beloved sky. The two gulls that appeared at his wings were pure as starlight, and the glow from them was gentle and friendly in the high night air. But most lovely of all was the skill with which they flew, their wingtips moving a precise and constant inch from his own. Without a word, Jonathan put them to his test, a test that no gull had ever passed. He twisted his wings, slowed to a single mile per hour above store. The two radiant birds slowed with him, smoothly, locked in position. They knew about slow flying. He folded his wings, rolled, and dropped in a dive to 190 miles per hour. They dropped with him, streaking down in flawless formation. At last, he turned that speed straight up into a long, vertical, slow roll. They rolled with him, smiling. He recovered to level flight and was quiet for a time before he spoke. Very well, he said. Who are you? We're from your flock, Jonathan. We are your brothers. The words were calm and strong. We've come to take you higher, to take you home. Home? I have none. Flock? I have none. I am outcast. And we fly now at the peak of the great mountain wind. Beyond a few hundred feet, I can lift this old body no higher. But you can, Jonathan, for you have learned. One school is finished, and the time has come for another to begin. As it shined across him all his life, so understanding lighted that moment for Jonathan Seagull. They were right. He could fly higher, and it was time to go home. He gave one last look across the sky, across that magnificent silver land where he had learned so much. I am ready, he said. And Jonathan Livingston Seagull rose with the two star-bright skulls to disappear into a perfect dark sky. Goodbye, Dad. Thank you all. Thank you to Bree and Roke and Heath and Brett and for pulling us all together today to celebrate his life.
Thank you for tending to that in the last days. I know that that wasn't an easy thing for Rowan to do, and we're all very, very grateful. In his later years, Dad spent a lot of his time, whenever he could, with friends and with us, his family. In South Africa, there's Rowan and his two boys, Thomas and Johnny. There's a sister, Alison, and our cousin Denise with her two children here in Zimbabwe. There's me and my older children, Cheyenne and Brioni and Brett. And then the younger ones, Amy and Aurora. Here, of course, with my other brother, Sean, as well as our cousins, Cheryl, Heather, and their children, too. Bree is going to close out our proceedings today. And she's going to do that by reading a poem, which was written by Arthur and published in his book called 70. Come on, Bree.
Hi, everybody. I wasn't ready to say goodbye to my Gramps, and I don't think anything could have ever prepared me for it. But just yesterday, I was thinking, maybe we don't ever really have to say goodbye. My Gramps wrote a poem called Departure in this group, in this book, 70. And I'm going to read it to you all shortly, and I'll explain why now. This poem has brought me some comfort in the last week, not only because it was written by Gramps himself, but also because it shows me that I can always remember him and that he's always with me. He's with us all, because every time we see a mosasa tree or a falcon flying up high, every time we hear and we feel the August wind and we hear the sounds of the Zambezi Valley, he's there in it all, and his legacy will always live on. He's truly left his footprints in the veldt, and he's left his mark amongst men. For as long as the earth that he so loved remains, we will be able to see him and remember him in everything that we do. So now, from the belt singer himself, I have lived my life to the full, with my cup always overflowing. And since the day that I left school, I've spent my lifetime roaming. I stopped for some years here and there when my 3 sons were growing, then left again to travel where the bushveld winds were blowing. I slept on the ground with the stars above and the distant moan of a lion, and pondered fate and life and love and the jewel belt of Orion. But my life is over, my time has come, and I hear the death wind calling. I know the peace of a race well run as I feel the darkness falling. Now I lie in the heart of the generous earth, and its comfort folds around me. Soil of the land that gave me birth, one with me now completely. Now I can wake with the coming of spring, with the red mimosas glowing. I can hear the sound of the robins sing, and the wind in the gorges moaning. And sometimes my sons come back to me, and we talk of the wild white places, and many of my old friends I see, and delight in familiar faces. Go back to the trappings of man when you must, back to the streets and houses. I am eternally part of the dust of the earth that me espouses. And if you would visit with me again on my hillside rest reclining, you will know my voice in the wind and my love in the warm sun shining.
Thanks, Brizzy. Beautifully done. Right, folks, we've come to the end of our official memorial proceedings. It seems fitting to end on that note with his own words and his own reassurance that he knew that piece of a race well run, and that he found comfort in the idea of being eternally part of this generous earth's dust. We included, with your order of service today, a bookmarker with that poem printed on it. It's a small memento from us to you. Thank you to Shine for organizing that one, and for coping with our many editing suggestions. Thanks to Brioni, who took care of the setting up and the managing of the Zoom room. Thank you to all of those who logged in on Zoom for sharing with us in our tribute to Arthur Dunkley. Thank you to all the very many folks from all walks of life and all parts of the globe, the world over, who phoned or wrote or sent emails or messages of condolence and encouragement, as well as memorabilia. But thank you most of all to those of you who came in person and attended. Please join us for a drink and a snack or two if you can. And if you can't join us here, then raise a glass in his memory, remembering, of course, that the preferred beverage was a glass of red.
Dry red.
Dry red. He was so many things to so many people, and he will be fondly remembered by us all. Cheers of us.